Yep.
Welcome, sorry, welcome to the, you didn't know what I was doing. Welcome to Voices in Recovery podcast, Nick. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you. I've just watched your page for a few months here and just noticed how involved you are. And it really speaks to me when, folks are so involved and taking such like personal, I don't know what the word is, just like personal engagement, I guess, in these things that you and I were kind of chatting about in messages. But I'm not going to say too much. I just want to hear your story. So I just wanted folks to kind of get an idea of how we met. The internet can be kind of a cool place sometimes.
Yeah, that's for sure. It definitely can be.
Yeah. So tell us your story. Like who are you? Who is Nick?
Tanse, my name is Nikk Goodswimmer. I'm originally from Treaty 8 Sturgeon Lake, Alberta, but I was raised out here in Treaty 6 Amisquitchie, Wisconsin, Edmonton.
Mm,
And for most of my life, I was former youth in care.
okay. Okay. So what kind of got you and I'm going to just admit that I am 100% ignorant. What kind of got you involved in activism? Like I know there's like lots of different reasons for different folks. How has that journey been for you?
Honestly, it kind of actually started when I was really young. And unfortunately, with people who live a certain life or have lived a certain life, especially those in care, we tend to grow up 10 times faster than those who have quote unquote a normal life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, where that really all started was for me back in, I think this was maybe, um, I want to say like between from 2010 to 2012, around the
Mm-hmm.
same time that Idle No More took place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there was so much going on actually, all at the same time. And for whatever
Yeah.
reason, I was hearing about certain things in social class because we were learning about things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was in junior high. I think I was in maybe like uh what grade was I in anyways? I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But it was at the time that I was in junior high. And so
2012 feels like a lifetime ago, hey?
yeah,
Like it does. It
it's
feels like
really
two
weird.
lifetimes. Yeah, I totally
And
agree. Yeah.
so I was learning about what was happening out in Attawapiskat in
Mm-hmm.
social class, and Shannon's dream came up. And I was learning about the young activist herself, Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to pronounce her last name, and I don't want to butcher it for the life of
Mm-hmm.
me. But all of a sudden, that started to come in, and how she was talking about how there's no clean water, and especially there's no proper education for those on reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for whatever reason, it just clicked right in, and I was listening to it. And it's kind of funny thinking about it because I've always been my whole life really interested in learning about my culture.
Mm-hmm.
And um, there was some part of my life before I was in foster care where I had cultural connections,
Mm-hmm.
but due to being in foster care, it was really, I guess you could say, ripped away from me.
Yeah, and it's probably exactly what it was ripped away. I'm wondering, like, how did foster care um, work to strip away your indigenous connection, like your connection to your land, to ceremony, to your culture?
Oh my goodness, that's
I know it's a big
it's a
question,
lot.
but
It's a lot, honestly.
yeah.
But from what I remember, and my truth is that I was ripped away, literally
Mhm.
from my mom.
Wow.
And they had Indian agents, CFS workers, to come in with cops, literally frickin' cops, just to take, us kids away.
Oh.
And I never went back to the reservation, and I didn't grow up there. I grew up out here in, in the city.
Hmm.
And so I guess you could say, and I really don't like labels, but I guess you could say
Hmm.
I'm an urban indigenous person.
Hmm.
I am both, well, actually, technically, I am Cree, Stoney, and Métis.
Hmm.
And, when that happened, all of a sudden, everything changed. And my mom, she specifically asked for our hair to not to be touched.
Hmm.
And they buzzed it right off because they said we were quote unquote dirty.
Oh no. Mm.
And so, there were times where, I mean, it always had been around, but I just
Mhm.
kind of wish there was, more of that connection back then.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't know if this goes for every system that they had at the time, but and maybe maybe the people that I grew up with were really just that cheap. But they
Hmm.
said that we were only allowed to go to at least one round dance or one powwow a year,
Hmm.
but then everything else had to be through the school curriculum.
Hmm.
So, all of a sudden, when I was sitting there in class, and everybody knew I was a foster kid, and there was always that stigma that followed along with it. As soon as somebody found out, oh, you're in a foster home. Does your parents abuse you? Are they drinking? Are they being quote unquote dumb Indians and stuff like that? I'm
And
not.
so they literally stripped it away. Every
Yeah,
every aspect of connection was attempted to be cut away,
yeah,
um, which is awful and has been the practice of Canada for a long, long time. Since
and it's
Canada,
still
long before
happening,
Canada. Yes.
and it's still
It's
very
it,
much happening.
yeah. Wow. And so what was it like to try to reconnect? Like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, and you definitely don't have to, of course, talk about anything that you're not comfortable talking about. Um,
Yeah.
I'm just really curious how arduous the journey back to connection has been, you know?
Um.
Um,
Yeah. So I've always had a really deep interest and love for my culture, and
mhm,
I already knew who I was and where I came from.
mhm,
But there were times in my life where I really had to stuff it down and suppress myself and try and be a quote unquote good Indian.
mm.
It's not funny,
Oh,
but it's just, one of those things where it's just, oh my gosh, I can't find the right
yeah.
word for it. But
Well, it's such an awkward thing, because it's so racist, right? Like
yeah,
the whole idea behind that is so racist that I guess if we're not laughing about it, we're going to be crying about it, right? Like,
yeah,
because it's just so awful how indigenous humans have been treated, you know,
yeah.
and under the law, without the law, in every aspect, right? It's okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And, yeah, like I said, it all started with me learning about Idle No More.
Hmm.
And when I was sitting in social class, something within me just, lit a fire,
Hmm.
and and just something told me, I guess, subconsciously, uh, I was told to wake up.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, my whole world view just started to shift right at that moment. And I
Hmm.
was like, I want to say I was like maybe 12 or 13 at the time,
Hmm.
maybe 14, somewhere abouts. And, while this was happening, all of a sudden they started to come out at the same time with
Hmm.
Indigenous youth who were in care that were passing
Yeah.
away. And I was in care at the same time.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, it just was like, this is very much real, is happening, and the way that these peoples are teaching about indigenous people. Where it's like They want to erase us, like
Mhm.
we were a thing in the past, like
Yeah, and
residential school happened in the past, you
mhm.
know?
And this was not the past. This was 2012,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like 2010, 20, like this is, and folks, this is one of the reasons why I just feel like it's so important to share stories, is because there's a lot of folks that don't know that this is still ongoing, right? Like there's and maybe it's cognitive blindness, maybe it's people choosing not to know, but I really believe after seeing what's happened in terms of our media during the genocide in Palestine,
yeah,
I have observed and am witnessing daily the media edging out these really true happenings, you know, and edging out that residential schools. First of all, the last one closed in '97, I think, if
yeah,
96, '97, but that did not end the child welfare system. In fact, from what I've read and heard from stories, is it in fact emboldened the child welfare system.
yeah.
And
And
you
they
know,
call it now the millennial scoop, and I was a part of that.
yes, yes, the millennial scoop. I just heard that a couple weeks ago, and that's what I didn't know that they called it that. Um, but I obviously am aware of the huge movement for child welfare to separate Indigenous, Black Indigenous people of color, their children,
Yeah,
from their parents. And that
yeah,
is just an extension of the residential school system and the apartheid, in my mind, that Canada has imposed since Canada, long before Canada was a thing.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing that it strips away. It strips
Hmm.
away your identity. It strips away
Hmm.
community. It strips away pretty much everything, and you're left to the bone
Yeah.
to really fend for yourself now.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's the thing with especially now with what's happening with the child welfare system. There, I don't know if you heard about that, but there's this conversation about Bill 38.
Hmm. Yes, please tell us
And
more about Bill 38 if you don't mind.
oh my goodness. So that's a long one. It's
Hmm.
definitely something that a lot of people would have to look up, but from my
Yeah.
knowledge and how I understand is
Mhm.
that after a certain point of those that have been coming out of foster care, they
Mhm.
don't do investigations to those that had passed away during or after this whole process, the age out process, which is now
Oh,
22. It used to be
yeah.
24.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they don't take a look at things as to why things happen. Like,
Hmm.
why is it that, youth who are coming out from care are going houseless? Why are they
Hmm.
struggling with mental health or addictions?
Hmm.
Why is it that they're prone to being out in the world and not knowing how to do things? And that's
Hmm.
that's the very thing that, that makes me sad, honestly, really thinking about it.
Hmm.
And it
No
makes me
doubt.
upset. And the fact that now they're trying to cut the age to now just 22. You're erasing a whole bunch of other people. You're erasing all those voices of those that have passed on and erasing
Yeah,
those that are still here with us.
absolutely. I think it's the responsibility of the foster care system to
And
provide support until
that's the
until the
thing.
person. Yeah.
Technically speaking, and this is by law, um, no offense to anything or anyone, but that's the white man's law, that they
Hmm.
are technically our guardians, our parents.
Hmm.
What kind of parent wants to throw their child out like that?
Yeah.
You know?
That's yeah, that's just like that's the white man's whitewashing of every part of it, right? Like we're doing it for the greater good of humanity. Like it's just still it's like the extension of residential schools, the extension of segregation, the extension of um, all the genocides that have taken place in North America. Um, Not to mention other places within, like including specifically indigenous humans, right? Like
Yeah.
um, and then for us to turn around, the same white men, to have laws that don't allow for real healing.
Yeah.
Um, right? It's almost like we basically have turned it back on it. Well, I mean, we do have a victim blaming society, right? Like we,
Yeah, it is very victim blaming. And
yeah,
that's the thing that I find it's like, how can you be like that? That's so contradicting. Like you're
yeah,
telling people to heal, but then do things
yeah,
to people. It's like, what? Make it make sense?
hmm
You know?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
have a heart.
Mhm. Yeah, no doubt. And I think like that's part of the trouble that I'm observing is that there's lots of folks without like real heart for other people, like they'll claim that they love their family and stuff, but when it comes to anyone else, they're just shut down.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
and
think
I,
that's just what it is. It's learned
hmm
behavior from,
hmm
many generations, and I really hate to say it. But,
hmm
I always hear this from older folks. Oh, I remember back in the days it was good. But then I think about other things of like, what about the apartheid? What about residential
hmm
schools while this was happening? Or,
yeah,
especially when it came to, that time and era of the 60s and 70s. Oh, the hippy dippy
hmm
stuff. And no
yeah,
offense to anyone, it was probably a great time. But
hmm
I'm just like, with all these other things happening, and you really would
well,
think that,
yeah,
with this woke idea of really being there for the people, but yet not
hmm
listening. I don't
hmm
know if this is just subconsciously that people are doing this, or if this just out of pure ignorance. I don't want to be
hmm
mean or step over toes about that, but it's like,
hmm
maybe actually wake up.
Well, and I think you're right though. I think there's so many different reasons why people choose to just keep going. And I don't want to be a person who assumes why people do what they do because there are usually lots of reasons. However, in the case of keeping indigenous rights down, that benefits a great deal of people. And so they're going to continue to try to do that, right? Like, because
Yeah.
there's, unfortunately, we are finding out that, I mean, you can be pretty brazen nowadays. Like, racists don't have to hide anymore, bigots don't have to hide anymore. Like, we're,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
yeah.
a really big conversation with that too. And like we
hmm
were talking about, it blows my freaking mind, even with the microaggressions or with
hmm
learned behavior,
yeah.
that it still exists.
Yeah.
It's still
Yeah.
out there, and now people are being really bold about it. And I'm like,
hmm
this is what I'm talking about, and now people are seeing it. Oh my goodness.
hmm And yeah, exactly. And because it's becoming a little bit more, it's easier to see now because we all have cameras with us and people are recording just about everything now, which is great because now we can see each other. We can
Yeah.
actually meet humans as opposed to just hearing stories about, you know what I mean? Like we can actually meet each other
Yeah.
and find out that, you know what, like a lot of the biases we were taught are just not true,
Yeah.
you know and that's like a pretty cool thing, I think. But again, it usually means that we're coming together because there's something wrong, you
Yeah.
know and that we're trying to shed light on that. And so like in terms of your continue are you still involved with Idle No More? Did you go to protests? Did
Actually,
you
it's not that I attended and I wasn't a part of it, but
hmm
what really got me was the biggest one. And a lot of people will, I don't know if they talk about it now, but at the time,
hmm
because one of the major roads for, the big trucks and everything,
hmm
um, my reserve actually blocked off that main highway.
yeah
And, with Idle No More, because they had enough and they were tired of, people coming into our lands and disrespecting, the protocols and things like that, or being disrespectful in general.
yeah
And so they just happened to throw in a blockade. And when I learned about that, it just kind of clicked in. And I was like, hey, I'm from there. I don't know
hmm
what really is happening from a point of view as I was only reading it.
hmm
And ever since then, that's when yeah, like I mentioned, that fire within me just woke up and I was
hmm
starting to see things differently. And
yeah
so I got really, really interested in reading a bunch of books about, people's stories of like residential schools and really paying attention to what was available to me at the time.
Mhm.
And so when it came to after all these things that, I was personally going through at the time, I just started to use all those experiences to help other people. And so all of a sudden, when it came to high school, I met a lady who is actually one of my distant relatives I didn't know at the time. And she's an advocate for, children in care, and also she you know helps connect people with their culture and stuff like that. And she's Métis herself, and oh my gosh, I don't know what it was, but she noticed something that was going on for me, and she thankfully put me into, this program called the Key Club.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where, she started to recognize things that I couldn't see for myself, that I had a lot of strengths of talking for other people and speaking up and being, really loud with my voice.
Mhm.
And so I started to do all that other stuff. Thankfully, I managed to pass that.
Mhm.
But then in the end, I actually dropped out because the school that I was going to, unfortunately, seen me as that label, foster kid.
Mhm.
And that's what haunted me for the rest of my life. Because when it comes to those stigmas, they put you as a kid that's not wanted. They put
Mhm.
you as a troubled kid. You
Mhm.
have all these other labels that follow you. And, the biggest thing was for me was being indigenous.
Mhm.
And that followed me throughout, until I ended up at this one school that really, that's when I started to become involved with community.
Mhm.
And that's where it really all started for me at the time of, I think this was 2016, 2017.
Mhm.
And so that's when I was coming out of care, and I took my brother with me, and I went to inner city high school. And, things kind of for myself was okay, but it wasn't, because I still had all that trauma that I was carrying from being
Mhm.
in care and experiencing all those not so great things during school. Unfortunately, I was bullied a lot. I was picked on, and there were times where, quite literally people would be beating me up, and people would walk by like, "Oh, she must have done something to deserve that."
Mhm.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And there were times too where I was questioning myself of who I am
Mhm.
and my self-identity. How do I want to express myself? How do I want to look? Or what's my thing of,
Mhm.
type of music and stuff like that. I went through I kid you not, I went through many identity crises, not knowing
Mhm.
who I was, because it was like, I don't know who I
I'm
am,
sure.
really.
Yeah.
And so when I went to inner city high school, that's when they started to notice, something was off again. And they work with kids who, are street kids or those that have troubled pasts and stuff like that. And I'm very grateful for them. They're a really
Mhm.
good school, really good programs. They are more so one on one, and they don't look at your weaknesses as weaknesses. They look at a potential of being a strength. And so
Oh, that's nice.
all of a sudden, at that same time, I was going through, um, yeah, I went through a lot. I was battling addictions for a long,
Mhm.
long time. And, what, three of them were definitely the big ones there, which was alcohol and methamphetamines and pills. That
Mhm.
was my way of getting that hug that I needed growing up.
Yeah.
That hug of, my parents, or, an auntie that I would try and look for, but I was looking for it in wrong places. And so, um, yeah, there was just a lot that happened when I moved from, point A to point B. And at
Mhm.
that time, I didn't really, I actually didn't want to live any further than turning 18. And that's
Mhm.
the sad reality of most children and youth, children in care,
Mhm.
that sometimes they just don't see a future for themselves.
Mhm.
And so when it came down to it, I really kept telling myself, yeah, I'm not gonna make it past a certain age, or,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna be up there with anybody, or, people just don't see me.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, I got heavily involved with, I wouldn't say I'm gang affiliated, but I knew a couple people,
Mhm.
and I did some things that I'm not proud of, but,
Mhm.
that's just a life lesson.
Mhm.
And
Well, and when we're in
so,
addiction, we do all kinds of stuff.
yeah, quite literally,
Yeah.
I kid you not.
Yes.
And, when you're a kid and you don't have anything, what's
Mhm.
the next thing that, and that's the thing too with these so-called big time gangsters or drug dealers.
Mhm.
They look for
Mhm.
the most vulnerable. That way they can, trap them in that lifestyle because they
Mhm.
don't know any better, right? And so that's kind of what it was like for me too, because I was
Yeah.
really vulnerable to anything and everything. Because,
Well, yeah.
I was sheltered my whole life almost.
Mhm. Well, you said it. You
And
didn't know better, but also you're looking for something that they're promising you,
I
right?
was
Like they're
looking for a family,
yeah, and they're
and that's what
promising
was
you that
promised.
connection. Yeah.
And, that's when
Wow.
I started to really notice all these things that people were talking about, stereotypically of how natives are.
Mm.
And I was just like, it's not true, but it
Mhm.
does tend to happen. I wouldn't
Mhm.
say it's half truths, but there's
It's
things that still needs to be addressed on a bigger
yeah,
scale because it's not
yeah.
just indigenous people.
No, it's there's just so many lies intermingling with what people think are truths, but those even some of those truths are just based on biases, right? Like
Yeah.
um and of course, like the dominant colonial culture in North America has worked very hard to silence those voices,
You
right?
know,
Like
it's so crazy to me to think about it
mhm.
because when you think about it, who is the biggest hustlers here?
Oh, you know who that is.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like,
Yeah.
and yet they expect you to work from, say for instance, 6 o'clock to whatever time.
Hmm.
That's like a full day, and that's that mentality. Again, it comes from
Hmm.
colonialism.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's why
And
I was like, you know what? I don't think this life is cut out for me like that. And
mhm.
what really got me was there were times in my life where I put myself in danger.
Mhm.
And not to say that I wasn't scared,
Mhm.
but when you're in addictions, you think differently.
Mhm.
It's like,
100%.
okay, well, let it happen. But at the
Yeah.
same time, and deep down, it's like, oh my God, like this is
Mhm.
happening. And
Yeah, like there's that
so,
mix. Yeah.
um, when it came to 2018, that is when, things really started to really come apart for myself.
Mhm.
I was really badly into, pill popping and methamphetamines, and
Mhm.
I isolated myself so bad where I was driving myself to a really dark place.
Mhm.
And because of the things that happened to me, there were a couple times where I did try to take my life. And
Mhm.
because of those voices from taking those drugs,
Mhm.
it was my subconscious saying, I had enough. I'm tired of this life. I'm tired of the way that things just didn't happen for me. Nobody
Mhm.
cares. Nobody even wants to even listen.
Mhm.
But then when my little sister, she came up to me and she was, I want to say, maybe in grade 3 or 4 at the time. She was little.
Mhm.
And it really struck home and it really hit me in the heartstrings because little did I know that she was watching me self destruct.
Mhm.
And, this is the thing that people don't understand with little kids. They know.
Mhm.
They know when they see that. They
Yeah,
see everything and anything, and they're really vulnerable. And
just that.
so she came up to me and she asked me, "Who are you and what are you doing?"
Mhm.
Because I want my sister back.
Mhm.
And so the social worker I had at the time,
Yeah,
um she got
that's a
really.
powerful thing from your sister, eh? That's just
Yeah,
powerful.
and she
Yeah.
doesn't remember that. And she was just little,
Wow.
little at the time. So
Yeah.
it was like, oh my gosh, I even thinking about it,
Wow.
I do want to cry about it too.
No doubt. Like it just it kind of washed over me how it's just like that's pretty powerful.
And so my teachers, my social worker, and because I was still on SAFA for until
Mhm.
I turned 23 and I got caught in the crossfires, but I'll get back to
Mhm.
that. Um Back in 2018, uh, yeah, my all even my doctors got involved, and they said, we're gonna give you an ultimatum, whether you like to or not, but it's really up to you. You make that decision for yourself, as you are over the age. You're a grown adult now, but we would like if you can make that decision for yourself to either go to treatment or keep doing what you're doing.
Mhm.
Because, one way or another, if you continue on, you're not going to even live past till whatever age that you make it up to. And
Mhm.
that's the way it is. Uh, Again, it's really up to you. And then my social worker got heavily involved at the time. And, she was like, yeah, and I'll take you to court for it too and get it court ordered. Do you want that? And I
Mhm.
said, no, I'm going to
Mhm.
go to treatment then. It was a really hard decision to cut everybody off and
I bet.
really sober up because the thing too with addictions, and this is the thing that gets me the most when people talk bad or talk down about those, and
Mhm.
it's like, be happy and glad you don't know what it's like.
Mhm. I agree.
Because like, who gave you rights to judge other people?
Mhm.
Only God or creator, whoever you believe in, can judge us.
Mhm.
Nobody else can. They make their own decisions. They have a contract with creator, and that's the thing too. And you don't know what people have been through to get to that point.
Very true.
And the thing with sobering up and going cold turkey, depending on
Mhm.
what kind of substance you're sobering up off of, there needs to be some sort of intervention in between.
Mhm.
Because realistically, when you try to go cold turkey, what happens? Some people end up hospitalized. Some people
Yes,
end up really hurting
can be very
because
dangerous.
of, yeah. And I've heard of many countless things before going to treatment from other people that some people have died being there.
Mhm.
And it's very sad.
Yeah.
And myself, I didn't know at the time that, that the things that I was doing, I was harming myself. But at the same time, it can even just be from from one little accident to lead you
Mhm.
to down that road of addictions.
Yeah.
Like say for instance, you get into a car crash, you hurt your back. What's the
Mhm.
doctor gonna do? They're gonna prescribe you something. It's just as
Yeah.
simple like that, and that's how it
Mhm.
starts.
Yeah. It sure can, and it's very quick.
And so I was self-medicating myself because of the things that I went through.
Mhm.
And there were times where quite literally, and this you'll probably hear a lot from other foster care kids who came out of care. Um, Sometimes the parents or guardians, whatever, they make the kids do things other kids too.
Mhm.
And so when I mentioned that I was being beat up a lot, I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was medicating all that pain that I had
So
and that I
sorry.
was carrying.
Mhm,
And so little did I know was that those pills were opiates.
mhm.
T3s, T4s, etc.
Yeah.
are, medically prescribed opiates.
Mhm,
And so it was living hell for me to be in that treatment facility, but I'm glad that I made that decision, even though it
mhm,
wasn't under my decision.
mhm. You were kind of coerced.
And yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
but the same time too, I was actually hospitalized right after because of the pain that I was having
Mhm. Yeah.
from going cold turkey.
Mhm,
And I swear all my life I thought that I was gonna actually die.
mhm.
That's how much it was hurting and that's how much like I was going through. And
Yeah.
I kid you not, being sober for that long, I went through many health crises.
Mhm.
It's scary and
Oh,
it can feel like it's a lonely journey.
you
And
said it.
right then and there, that's when I made that decision to really get involved with community. I really wanted to do better, not just for myself, but for my family too. And I also made that decision to get culturally connected. And I'm so grateful for, all that help that I received at inner city high school.
Mhm,
And they were the only ones that, have seen me for who I am, besides
mhm,
being, that addict or that troubled kid or that foster
mhm.
kid. They seen me
Yeah.
for me. And they were like, you know what? This one right here is a
Mhm.
lot more and has more potential with things. I'm so
Mhm.
very grateful for that.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, no doubt. After all the shit, it's nice that some folks came through, you know?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so what really got me in the activism scene was actually being at the Greta Thunberg
Hmm.
um event, which
Okay.
happened back in I think yeah, right around after I just got out of treatment.
Hmm. Okay. Perfect timing.
Uh, yeah, and I was like, holy smokes.
Hmm.
Who would have known?
Yeah, it's
It was
pretty awesome
funny.
because she's quite the human, hey? She's pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
and it was so funny because I got really stoned and there's this picture that has been going around of me at the time and
Hmm.
what it said was that we're the ones that our ancestors prayed for.
Hmm.
And so put
Hmm.
on my I put on paint on my face like a warrior.
Hmm.
And I went out there and I got really freaking stoned. And next thing you know, somebody came up to me and they're like, here, have this megaphone and I want you to say something. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, just something within me just started to
Hmm.
really like talk about saving our planet, saving our Mother
Hmm.
Earth. This is our home. Not just indigenous people, but everybody.
Hmm.
And this is where
Yeah.
we need to all come and unify because you
Hmm.
cannot have unity without community.
Yeah.
And so that's the important part of, taking care of our home.
Hmm.
And so I just, started talking from the heart about that.
Hmm.
And I just started doing what came natural to me. And I just kind of gave a real good war cry, and people were like, I don't even know who you are, but you're one amazing person. And I was like,
Hmm.
what?
Hmm.
It was
Well,
just a
because
lot.
yeah, I bet it
And
is, because it
then
takes a lot of courage to do it.
everybody just took pictures left and right. And then they
Hmm.
all wanted to know who I was. And I was just like, oh, I'm just your average Joe here.
Hmm. Yeah. The voice of a lot of folks who've never had a voice is what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, from there on, I started to really get involved with school. I started
Hmm.
to do a lot of better things.
Hmm.
But then at the time too, when I got caught in the crossfires of aging out, and
Hmm.
they made that decision of being 22. I just turned 23, and I
Hmm.
was in the process of getting onto AISH and
Hmm.
also school.
Yeah.
But because of having no backups, nobody to support me, you know what they gave me instead?
Mm.
They gave me a bunch of frickin' papers to say,
Mm.
here you go. There's your resources. Do it yourself.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
We can't be there for you. Sorry.
Mm.
And then they
Because
cut
you're
me off.
too old now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's sad to say, but I really didn't know how to do things.
It's
Like how
incredibly
to,
sad. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of people don't know about this, about foster
Mm.
care youth, that they don't know how to cook, how
Mm.
to, talk for themselves because everything's done for you. And
Mm.
if you say something and maybe, people have had good experiences
Hmm. I'm
or
sure there are
have
some.
had good homes, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. I'm not
Hmm.
saying everybody was like that, but the guardians that I had,
Hmm.
um, if I spoke up, they had, the kids to intervene and say,
Hmm.
no, you can't be talking right now. You don't have a voice. You don't matter. And
That's an awful
so,
feeling.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it took a lot of courage just to find my voice.
Yeah.
And I got involved with, with leadership cohorts and started going from there. And it just kept building up. And all of a sudden, right at that same time that I ended up houseless, that I
Hmm.
was on the streets because of this decision and having no supports in place, no support worker, nothing. Even though I knew I could have gone down to the Boyle Street, I just didn't know how to ask properly.
Hmm.
And I had really bad anxiety, coming off from drugs and alcohol and everything
Hmm.
that was happening in between, and I was scared for my life. Truthfully, when I talk, I am actually scared half the time,
Hmm.
but I think that's kind of just something that I've been working through, thankfully.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, because it
Um,
takes courage to talk. So
yeah, that's for sure.
hmm makes
And
you feel
so
vulnerable.
that's when all of a sudden, one of my friends, they called me out and they said they have a proposal for me. And I said, "What's that?" And I got involved at that time of when Camp Pekawewin was
Mm.
being shut down. I started working at Tipanawa. Even though I've seen it, I was hearing about it on the news and everything, and I said, "How sad is it that people who are on the streets, they don't get the proper supports. They don't have proper housing, and sometimes they struggle with things that people just don't see.
Mhm.
And to be on the streets and being treated like that, that's not right. And
It's not.
even for somebody as young as me who had been on the streets, I know what that's like. To be
Mhm.
tossed around, to being told, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh, you can't be here. Oh, you're
Yeah.
the scum on the earth of this planet. And it's like,
Mhm.
really? I don't want to say walk in my shoes, but like,
That's
I
awful.
don't wish that on anybody.
Mhm.
And so I started working with Higher Good at Tipanawa. And all of a sudden, that just opened a lot of doors for me.
Mhm.
And then at that same time, I lost my partner that year due to, alcohol. And he too was a former youth in care who
Mhm.
was struggling with addictions, and alcohol got him.
Oh, I'm so
And then I
sorry.
got involved with what was formerly known as Bear Clan Patrol. Now they're
Mhm.
now known as Bear Claw. I got involved with them.
Okay.
And so just watching Judith, holy man, she's a powerhouse, that one. And I
Mhm.
love her so much for that.
Mhm.
Little does she know that she actually has mentored me the whole time while working
Mhm.
with her.
Nice. That's always nice to be able to work with your mentor.
Yeah, and it was so
Hmm.
amazing just, being out there and hearing people's stories and, having that conversation. And so all of a sudden things really started to change for me and I started sharing my story and then people, having to relate to the things that I've been through or
Hmm.
knowing that there are safe people to go to and talk to.
Yeah.
And that's when I really started to get more into cultural connections and I started to learn from people out on the streets of, our Cree languages and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so I was learning here and there, and then sometimes I would tease people, and then they'll be like, "Ha, that's a good one." So yeah, it was a really positive experience. I never had anything, really bad happen to me. I mean,
Hmm.
sometimes here and there, people will have their bad days. That's fine. Or
Hmm.
sometimes people, things just happen.
Yeah.
But working that job though, and it's very opposite for me that I've noticed. I never had any problems from, you know, unhoused folks.
Hmm.
I've always had problems with people who were housed
Hmm.
because they always said, "Oh, you don't know your job, or you don't know how to fucking do that," or sometimes
Hmm.
I'll get really racist remarks of me
Hmm.
working,
Jeez.
and it's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, not
Like, what
surprising,
the
hey?
what the heck?" And, the thing with my job is that most of us are indigenous and we do get that a
Hmm.
lot. And I'm so
It's
grateful for
awful.
this because we use our knowledges from what we learned of being on the streets
Hmm.
to use it to help other people.
Hmm.
And not only are we just bathroom cleaners or anything, but we also do overdose prevention. And we're
Hmm.
also, the info guys.
Yeah.
Say for instance, if somebody needed medical assistance, we got our phones, we call 911.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
if somebody needed resources, we would call 211 and they would help
Hmm.
them from there. Things like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Just being there to be
Now,
of use to folks. Yeah.
yeah, and that just always came second nature to me because that's the way I
Hmm.
grew up. And that's the way with, indigenous culture. We're all there for each other.
Hmm.
And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to now be who I'm meant to be.
It's amazing.
And, but with what's going on today, though, I currently
Hmm.
don't work, unfortunately, because of those budget cuts.
Hmm.
And, Higher Good is one of those companies out there that is on the line of being harm reduction, but not harm reduction.
Hmm.
We're not the
Hmm.
harm reduction guys per se, but we do overdose prevention.
Prevention. Yeah.
And so
That sounds
that's
like harm
where
reduction to me.
basically, yeah, in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Reducing harm, right? If it reduces
Yeah.
harm, and overdose prevention reduces harm greatly. So, yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm.
oh my gosh, it was a long freaking story from there of how it all started with Boyle Street Co-op
Hmm.
and watching it be
Okay.
destroyed and having to work like literally a block off from there, watching
Mm.
it and I'm like in tears because I'm like, I have so many good memories there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And
That,
just working there and stuff like that and now the cats group trying to sue Boyle Street. It's like what in the world is really going on?
yeah, no
What's up
doubt.
with these billionaires? Like, come on.
Yeah. They just want more. That's all it's about. More greed, more stuff.
And even with the sweeps that are still happening today,
Mm.
it's like,
With EPS, like all the sweeps of
yeah,
unhoused, you mean? Or yeah,
yeah, it's still happening. It's still
yeah.
happening.
Same here. Same in Calgary. It's like there's a war against the unhoused. There's a war against poverty in this province and
Yeah,
probably all across the planet. But like it's really, really awful here. Yeah.
even there's like a whole big thing too with those that, who have disabilities and stuff. They're
Yeah.
trying to cut age.
Hmm.
And now that they're already living in poverty, they're going to be more so
Yeah.
either on the streets or wherever, you know? And it's like, what then? What are you going to do?
Well, they'll arrest them. That's their whole idea is like if they're out there on the street doing stuff that we don't like, we'll just arrest them. So it's kind of like this forced into, well, it's forced poverty, and then it's like over policed population, right? Like over
Yeah.
policed and underprotected, you know.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
it's not funny. It's not funny, but
but I
like
get it. What are we
I
supposed
was
to do?
I was there in Edmonton that day because I seen the live from previous of when Two
Mm,
Guns was arrested.
mhm,
And I was like literally up where the heck was I working? Oh, I was working at Churchill.
mhm.
And the next day after that all that stuff had happened and I watched the whole thing and it really angered me because it was like what the heck just happened? Like how do you get from, being peaceful to suddenly now attacking people and
Yeah,
hurting them?
yeah.
And all of a sudden, I went there cuz something called me out.
Mhm,
And um I got yeah, it was just one of those moments
mhm,
where, this is the thing that I tend to talk about a little bit before we start diving into this conversation because I think it's very important to know
mhm,
that with not just indigenous peoples, but peoples
mhm,
who have all these, um, quote unquote stories or what's that one word called? Legends and stuff like that.
mhm,
Uh so we have this prophecy
mhm,
that, it talks about, these oil fields uh as to what we call black snakes and
mhm,
people with these sicknesses and stuff like that. How it's interpreted is that it's already happening.
mhm,
And, the sicknesses that we refer to is greed. It's
mhm.
talking about, harming people in ways that it's like really sickening, honestly. Putting war against other people
Mhm.
and having them to battle it out because of, something that's just completely man-made
Yeah.
and, spreading all these biases
Mhm,
and, stuff like that. And so going back to Camp Roland or Camp Big Man,
mhm,
I was there that day and they said, and from what I heard, is that they weren't supposed to come in and take down the camp at all
mhm. Yeah.
because they had an injunction to wait until the week after,
Mhm,
that next Tuesday or Wednesday.
mhm.
And so we were under the impression, oh, they might not come back.
Yeah.
That's fine, but we're still going to be here and still stand in for the people, right?
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden, one minute led to another. We seen cops like coming in like really, really fast.
Mhm.
And so I was standing there and I was filming a little bit. And you can see from the videos that are posted online from Instagram and Facebook.
Mhm.
Personally, myself, my phone, it froze that day because of how cold it was. It
Oh
was,
shit.
I believe it was like -40, I think it
Mhm.
was. And I was
That's
like,
cold.
I was really bundled up. And
Mhm.
so just being there, I was still freaking cold. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know
Mhm.
how people can do it. And
Yeah.
thinking about it now, it's like, how was I able to live through this?
Mhm.
That is so freaking crazy. And it blows my mind that it's now
Mhm.
suddenly being illegal to be houseless.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what? And
Yeah. It's
so
insanity.
I was standing there, and as they were having that conversation from that video of I can't remember her names. I think it was Sergeant Amber Mays,
Mm.
that lady cop. Anyways,
Okay. I don't remember. Yeah.
she gave an ultimatum of
Yeah.
you either get on that bus or you can stay here and we'll arrest you and charge you with obstruction and blah 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 whatever else she said.
Yeah.
And basically what was said is that we're here to make peace with people and that we're exercising our treaty rights,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that we as not just indigenous people but people of this land, that we can be housed anywhere, not necessarily to say where we want,
Mm-hmm.
but where it's suitable for us,
Yeah.
because where else are we supposed to go?
Mm-hmm.
And from what I heard, all around in that neighborhood, they all wanted those peoples to stay because there was no issues, they had no problems, and sometimes they would go and ask if they needed anything.
Yeah.
And so when it came to that, all of a sudden the cops came rolling in real quick, and I was protecting the fire and the kids in that tent. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden everything just kind of slowed down for me, but fast paced. I had one of those moments where I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was freaking out in my mind, but then something told me to be still.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, looking at all what was happening and people being, assaulted and tossed down the hill because we were on a
Mm-hmm.
hill. And it
Yeah.
was really cold and slippery that day. I was like, holy smokes. And then in my
Wow.
mind, my first thought was, oh my gosh, I've seen this before. Where did I see it? And then all of a sudden it went to that picture that was passed around talking about residential school that Trent
Mm.
Monkman made. And then I thought about what has already had happened, like
Yeah.
Standing Rock, no Dapple, oh the Ochre
Mm.
Crisis. I thought
Yeah.
about everything, and even going back to my roots of my ancestors, who were literally starved, chased out, and massacred from where my ancestors are originally from,
Mm.
before all these man-made borders were made.
Yeah.
Um, the massacre of Wounded Knee,
Mm-hmm.
the Battle of Little Bighorn. I thought about those things, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it clicked in.
I'm having trouble
Like,
hearing you right now. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm having trouble hearing you all of a sudden.
oh, okay, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Nice.
Yeah, I
Okay,
was
so you
just
were talking about Wounded Knee and Little Bighorn.
yeah, and so all of a sudden it just clicked right in for me, and I was like, what the heck? Uh, yeah, it just unfolded right in front of me, and I told
Mm-hmm.
myself, this has happened already. We're going
Mm-hmm.
backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my mind, I was like, be ready, be prepared of what's to come and what's to happen.
Yeah.
And these cops, they're not going to stop. That was just the starting of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we talk about Free Palestine, look what had already happened at U of A here in Edmonton. People got really hurt. They had
Mm-hmm.
some sort of gas thrown at them. Things started to happen left and right. They really started to go militant.
Mm-hmm. They
And I
did.
was like, okay, I'm not crazy that I'm starting to see all of this unfold in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to, elders, knowledge keepers, or, people that I know that are on the front lines, that this is
Mm-hmm.
happening. And they all said the
Yeah.
same thing. Yep, it is happening. You're not crazy. I see you, I hear you. And I've
Mm-hmm.
been trying to, be there for other people. Unfortunately though, here in Edmonton, I have stepped back
Mm-hmm.
from some of these rallies and just the activism scene here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. There's divisions happening
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think in the world of activism, though, there's a lot of passionate humans, right?
Yeah.
And all these different passionate humans come together, and so of course there's going to be some difficulties. I'm hoping that we can gradually get through these challenges so that we can organize together, because once that happens, the establishment has no chance, right? Like
Yeah.
if we're able to all connect all of us together. Yeah.
Yeah, because even too, I have talked to native Calgarian about that,
Mm-hmm.
and they had said the same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then I talked to, YYC street cats,
Mm-hmm.
and they said the same thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so I'm not crazy.
No, you are definitely not. Things are not like I'm not willing to say that this is a normal, because this isn't normal, right? Like it's just not.
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, that's basically, not
Well,
not my whole life, but kind of
yeah.
how it all started. It started
Well,
with me being a little kid who felt
hmm
unseen and unheard. And even too, you can also catch my story from Zine and Heard, who
hmm
amplifies the voices of youth who were former foster care kids.
Okay. Seen and
And
heard.
also too, I mean, it's not that I completely stepped back from everything. It's just
Hmm
Edmonton in particular.
Yeah.
But I do things here and there, once in a while with, different organizations and stuff like that.
hmm Right
And
on.
really, I just want to be, um, I don't want to be seen or held above on a pedestal or anything. I just want other people to be heard,
hmm
really, and give them that power and to help them voice themselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nick. Really appreciate you taking the time. Is there, before we shut her down, is there like I'll need a photo of you if that's okay. You could just send it to
Yeah,
me like
sure.
via messenger, a photo. I was thinking of a photo with you with your face painted, if that was a cool, if you have photos of that time.
Yeah,
Um, that'd be really awesome if you're willing, if you're okay with me using that photo for the for the post.
yeah, I definitely can send that in for sure.
Okay, cool. I just really thank you so much. Like I can't thank you enough, because I know some of the stuff that you talked about is incredibly triggering and incredibly like um, a part of your intimate story. And so thank
Yeah.
you very much for sharing that with us, because I know that's not easy to do, you know. So thank you.
Yeah, just thank you for inviting me to being on the podcast. Uh it's been a really wonderful time talking to you and just really like being able to help empower other people,
Hmm
and um yeah, it's just amazing, honestly. And just hearing the podcast itself, I was like, holy smokes, I really enjoy that.
Oh, right on. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And it's really been it's an honor and a pleasure for me. Like I just really am grateful. Well, I'm just grateful that you were so willing to share who you are and kind of what's going on. Like it just I know that your voice will inspire many more voices than mine might, you know, and that's like so cool. Yeah. So thank you so much. I won't take up any more of your time. I'm sure you have other things to do.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. You as well. I hope you take care, and I look forward to chatting with you. I'll let you know when this episode will probably come out this coming Wednesday.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Right on, me too. It's been such an honor just to be able to chat with you. I've enjoyed it.